I'm back. Basically got about half of this laid out. About to the sink here on this side. Well, if you were paying attention, you can see that my design has morphed. It's no longer the same as it was in the last video. I started laying it out. I didn't like how this corner was coming together and the way the seams were lining up. So if you remember, these were turned lengthwise and I had equally spaced it on the previous joint. But like I said, I didn't like the way the corner was coming together, and so I changed it. And this is why I'm not a chess player. I have a hard time seeing the big picture sometimes, and for lack of a better term, I'm geometrically dyslexic. That's why I'm terrible at trim. I mean, I do a good job with trim work around doors and baseboards and whatnot, but when I'm doing my trim, I have to actually get a pencil and mark the direction of the angle, so that way I don't lose it in my head between where I'm going to install it and the saw. So everything gets twisted around in my head as far as geometric patterns and whatnot are concerned. That's just the same thing with when I was laying these corners out. I actually had to put the tile there, get my grease pen out, my grease pencil, and mark the direction of the angle. That way when I got over to the saw, I knew which way I had to set it into the miter jig. I'm still working on this part back here. What I got to do is, this is my window casing, and I'm seriously doubt I'd be able to slip a tile under there, let alone after I'd put glue down as well, because that's going to make it stand up even higher or even more proud. Would be a carpentry term. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Dremel tool here with this cut off, and I'm going to get a scrap piece of tile, lay it here, and then I'll use this to go in and cut where I need to cut it to the height. That way I can get a tile under there. It's nice and clean. You don't want to try to cut your, I mean, you can try to cut your tile to match this profile and just set it in there and then grout around it, but I don't like to do that. It's time consuming, and you can wind up messing up a bunch of pieces before you get it looking halfway decent, and then still, unless you're just spot on, it'll never look right. So the best thing to do is just go ahead, and we'll probably take about a 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch off of this, maybe even 1/4 of an inch, and then we'll slide that tile under there. When we glue it down, it should be a pretty tight fit, and if there's a gap, then we'll just go ahead and put some caulk in there or fill it in with grout, one or the other. Talked about these tile spacers before. Like I said, these are 1/16 of an inch, but I've decided to use this is a 1/16 of an inch this way. If you turn it, that's 1/8 of an inch thickness, and that's what I've decided to use for my joints. Now, the thing with these tile spacers is that you can actually set these down in the joint, and especially if you're working where all your joints are lining up and you got a full joint this way and this way, then you can just set that down in there, being as if this was 1/8 of an inch, since that's what I'm trying to achieve on my gap distance. But and you can set them down in there. I kind of did that right here. You can see it. In this case, since my joints aren't lining up, I had to modify it, cut one of the legs off to get it to fit down in there. And then you can space your tile that way. And then you can come back over it, and you can leave those in there and grout over it. Now, since these are thicker tiles, if you don't want to grout over it, and you want to come back and pull them all out, which is what I would recommend, because the reason I don't like leaving those in there is I want the strongest grout joint that I can achieve. And I'm going to pack that grout in there, and I don't want anything in there to interfere or to take up space where I could be fitting grout. If you do spacers like that, then they make a tool like this. This is seen as better days. It used to have a rubber collar on here so that you didn't damage your tile when you were digging those out. And it would be pretty hard to do it with these 16th inch spacers, but what you would do is you'd use this. Once your tiles are glued down and they're set, you would come in with this and just dig it out individually. Like I said, I don't like doing that. I don't like doing it that way. I don't like leaving them in there. Although maybe it probably wouldn't hurt anything, but that's just me personally. I'll set my spacers like this, and even if I was using it as a 16th of an inch space, I would set them in there like that. And that way when after the glue sets, I haven't even glued these down yet, by the way. I'm still doing my layout and my cuts. But after the glue sets, I just come back and pick them out one at a time. And then I can run my grout in there, and I'll pull that 16th of an inch one out later. I started doing my cuts around my sink, and basically, you know, it's just fairly simple. Simple way to do it is once you get your tiles in and you got your spacers in and everything's laying to where you want it to lay, then you just lay a full tile across here. Let me grab one real quick. You lay a full tile across there, and you've got your edges where your sink cutouts at, and then you just use a combination square right here. And you lay your combination square up on there. Mark your line that coming this way, and then do the same thing for the other direction. And you line that up like that, and you mark this line across there, and basically what you'll get is something that looks like this. Then you take it to your saw, and you don't even need to measure it. Didn't make the line very dark. And I gotta pull that spacer out anyway. So anyway, you imagine that this is a full tile that I've already cut, and here would be the marks roughly. Where you would need to cut it. So then you just open your fence up and flip that back. And go ahead and put your mark on the blade. Actually, you want to make it past the blade. You don't want it directly on there because you got your thickness of your cut that you have to be aware of. And I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt a heck of a lot because that lip for this sink is about 1 inch. But just, you know, it's a good practice to get into is when you're cutting, you know, this is your keeper piece. This is the piece that you're gonna not be using. So when you're lining that up, you want it just to the other side of your blade. Remember, these blades are not true; they wobble. So then you would just set your fence up. Got your mark. Needs to come over a little bit. I'm not going to cut it, but I'm just showing you. Okay, so you got it lined up on the saw blade. Then you go ahead and put your fence over, and then lock it down. Now your fence, the entire locking mechanism is right here. So sometimes it's off a little bit, and you go to lock it down, and it shifts. So you have to be aware of that and come back and check, and it still looks pretty decent. Then all you would do and this is another operation where you're going to get wet. You want your guard in place to keep some of the water down, but you want it high enough where you can keep an eye on your cut, and you would run this cut all the way to where it meets up, back up, try to focus, where it meets up with your other line here. And then you would stop your cut, turn your saw off, and then gently pull it out. I would highly recommend that you do, if you got a cut like this where you got a wide piece like this, and then you got a narrow leg that comes off of it, make this cut first. And the reason being is that once you make this cut here, you've only got this little bit of material here, and that's a weak point. And you have a good chance of that breaking on you. So I would make your larger cut first, and then when you're done with that, where you cut to that point right there. I know it's kind of hard to see. Then you go ahead and set your saw up to make your next cut. Again, keeping in mind that this is your keeper piece, and this is your this is the scrap, or the part you're not going to use. So in this case here, I'm going to want that mark, because I want that full width between that mark there and the edge. So you're going to set that saw blade up to cut on this side, the scrap side of your tile. Then you move your fence over and tighten it down. Okay, it's off a little bit. It's going to make too wide of a cut for our purposes. So you move it over a little bit, tighten it down, push it up against the fence, and that's about right where you want it. And then you'll do your cut, you'll follow this line down. Again, you'll drop this, just keep it high enough where you can see underneath it, because once you get to this point right here, you want to stop. You don't want to go any further. And then once you're done with that, you will wind up with this piece here. And that's what we're going to use. Go ahead and pull that spacer out. And then there you go. That's how you get that cut right there, the easiest way. You can measure, you can sit there and fiddle with the tape measure and whatnot, measure it, make sure you include your 1/8 of an inch gap here, you know, so you can do it either way. I just think that the other way I showed you is the easiest with the combination square. So anyway, that's where I'm at. So I'll go ahead and get this cut and finish cutting this piece here, these pieces. My next one's probably going to come to here. Then I'm going to have to do the same thing I did here on the back side and run that out, and I'll stop. And then I'll come over here and lay this side out, and like I said, and then run it in this way, and then wherever I wind up, whatever gap I wind up here, I'll cut a piece to fit it. And then I'll start gluing it in. Thank you.